During the Battle of the Somme in 1916, 49 British Mark I landships, codenamed a tank to make spies think they were just mobile water tanks, entered the battlefield in what was the first time in history that this type of vehicle was used in battle. It would not be a glorious beginning for the tank, however, and only 32 were available for the battle, as the others were not found to have been working properly. While they did have some successes, they proved mostly ineffective, and the next time they were used, during the Battle of Passchendaele, was also a disappointment, as they failed to move well, or even sometimes at all, in the wet and muddy conditions. But, as the war progressed, tanks started becoming more and more successful, and Germany designed their own tank to combat the British and French ones. In 1916, the German command formed a committee that would investigate the need for tank development for the German army. However, this reaction to British and French tanks was relatively muted, as the Allied tanks weren't particularly effective at the time, and elite infantry squads known as Sturmtruppen were more than capable of taking out an early World War I tank, and their deployment across the front lines was met with success far more often than any Allied armour at the time. These elite units were originally trialled with experimental body armour and shields, but speed was seen as the priority, although the helmet was kept, eventually replacing all of the traditionally spiked helmets of the German army. Despite the proficiency of Sturmtruppen, a direct German response to the Allied tanks was being designed, and on the 30th of April 1917, testing began. Original designs were made of wood, with extra weight added to replicate the effects that armour would have on the speed and manoeuvrability of the tank. The first production model was finished in October 1917, and it was named the A7V after the department that started it, the Allgemeines Kriegsdepartement 7 Abteilung, Verkehrswesen. It was equipped with 6 MG08 machine guns, 2 located at the rear and 2 on each side. The giant metal box bristling with machine guns was nicknamed the Moving Fortress by British soldiers. The front gun was a 57mm cannon captured from the British, Belgians or Russians. It wasn't just designed as a moving cannon, however, it had a dual role as an armoured troop carrier as well, meaning that the A7V would usually be packed with 25 men when in combat. There was no special compartment for the accompanying infantry, and with the engine in the middle pumping toxic fumes into the cabin, paired with the noise, heat and everything else, it must have been hell to travel in. And while the engine was very powerful, the fuel consumption was massive, meaning that even on road it had a maximum range of just over 37 miles or 60 kilometers. Its performance off-road was awful, meaning that it was usually used on-road. Every single A7V was hand-built, making every model unique, and although this resulted in a higher manufacturer quality, it made the cost of each A7V extremely high. This, paired with the German High Command still placing their faith in Sturmtruppen, meant that during World War I, only 20 A7Vs were built. In fact, the German army used far more captured British Mark IVs than their own A7Vs. Despite how few of them there were, the A7V took part in the first ever tank versus tank battle in history, where 3 British Mark IVs ran into 3 German A7Vs. 2 of the Mark IVs were of the female variant, meaning that they were only equipped with machine guns and not cannons, and were unable to damage the A7Vs, and retreated after taking some damage. The last remaining British tank duelled the lead A7V, almost destroying it and forcing the remaining crew to bail out. Soon after, the other 2 A7Vs withdrew. The Mark IV continued to fight on the battlefield and was joined by more armoured vehicles called Whippets, but later on lost a track due to a mortar shell and was abandoned on the battlefield. This battle saw all the available A7Vs get put into action, but their failure to score any meaningful victories meant that their effectiveness was put into major doubt, and the rest of the 100 A7Vs that had been ordered were cancelled. Allied tanks, however, saw more and more success throughout the war. In fact, captured British tanks that were repainted for use in the German army showed the effectiveness of that model in comparison with the German A7V, and plans were made to create a full-length track version of the A7V called the A7VU. Saying that, the A7VU looks suspiciously more like a British World War I tank than an original A7V. Because of its shorter shape and higher observation post, its manoeuvrability was lacking. Nevertheless, 20 were ordered in September 1918, but none were to be completed before the armistice that would signal the end of the war. There had been other potential tanks that were also not completed in time to actually fight in the war. The Allied use of tanks, and the lack of from the German army, is often considered one of the primary reasons why the Allies won the war. So what happened to the 20 A7Vs? Nearly all were either destroyed, scrapped or left abandoned, but one still remains today. The only surviving A7V is a tank christened Mephisto, which was captured by British and Australian troops in 1918, and then taken from London to Brisbane in Australia as a war trophy. It still sits today in Queensland Museum, but is not a working vehicle. The Tank Museum in Bovington, England does have a working replica, which complements the working Mark IV tank that was built for the movie Warhorse. That's it for this week. I do hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you think you want to see more content from us. Have a great week and stay safe.